Welcome folks, we're back for some more Math 120. So now we're going to be getting into chapter 9, which is changing gears yet again. So now we're going to be looking at geometry concepts. So if you have some geometry background, hopefully some of this will ring some bells, but if not, we're going to walk through all the technical details first, and then we'll see some applications as we go. All right, so the first definition is for a point. And by definition in geometry, a point is an object that determines a position but has no dimension. So no length, no width, or height to it. So it's hard to draw something like that, obviously, but since we have to have some sort of representation for it, it's going to be very, very simple. You have just a dot, and then usually it's labeled with a capital letter, not lowercase typically. So try to just use uppercase. And what we'll see primarily is it will be an uppercase form. So that would be point A. Pretty quick. So the next step up from that would be a line. And a line by definition is an infinite set of points in a one-dimensional straight path that extends in opposite directions without end. It's kind of hard to define what a line is. We know what a line is, but in this sense, it is going to be infinitely long. It goes on forever and ever in both directions. So we would have something that looks like this. And they'll put arrowheads on the end just to signify that it goes off forever and ever. Now, if you got more than one line on a particular page, then obviously you want to be able to identify it pretty quickly. So the way they would do that, typically you need at least 2 points. Not always, but typically, and they'll have them labeled, A and B or whatever. So again, this is going to be line AB. All right, so far so good. Now, from this, we can kind of break it up some. And in how we're going to break it up, we're going to break it up into 3 parts, a point and 2 half lines. So in this sense, a half line does not include the center point. So just like I said before, we don't typically use 1 point, but for this example, we will. So if I have a line and I demonstrate it using a single point or identify it with a single point, we can split it up into 3 chunks. So we got the left-hand chunk, the right-hand chunk, and then the point in the middle. So we'd have something like this. And how we not include that point in the middle is we just put an open hole there, an open dot. So we have a half line on this side. We have our center point. So there's A, and then we have our right-hand side. So again, this is another half line. So that's kind of how that would work. Now, half lines typically aren't used very often. What is used is actually the next piece, which is a ray. An array is determined by a starting endpoint and a half line. So basically we're combining A and the half line together. So again, we can't call this a half line because it includes the point. So this would be array. And if we wanted to label it, we could put a starting point, and so this would be ray AB. Now, it is going to be kind of technical as far as how you interpret things that are one-sided like this. This is a one-sided object, this is one-sided, this is one-sided. So when it's double-sided, then it's not as technical as far as how we identify it. But we're going to see some examples, and I'll try to articulate how those differences can be determined. Now, the last piece, though, before we get to that, is going to be a line segment. And the line segment is a portion of a line contained by 2 endpoints. So now we would have something like this. So we have an endpoint, our line in the middle, and then another endpoint. So something like that. So let's kind of break it down now. So we have line AB or BA. So again, because it's double-sided, we can reverse the direction of the letters and it doesn't make a difference. It's still describing the same picture. So we could have something that looks like this. So that's the figure. That's what it looks like. But as far as the symbol now, the symbol is a little bit peculiar. So it has that double-headed arrow above those two letters, those two capital letters right next to each other. So we could have it that way, or we could reverse it. But again, those double-headed arrows are important for describing a line. All right. Now the half line is only one directional, so we got to make sure we identify it correctly. So if we want to describe half line AB, we're going to have the open dot on A, and then we're going to have the solid dot on B. So this would be half line AB. Now you're probably saying, well, why can't we just reverse it? It doesn't mean that's not that big of a deal, is it? Well, technically it is. Now, if I kept the letters in the same spots, if I wanted to have A here and B here, and I wanted to describe half line BA, now this is important. It tells me that I want to start at B and go through A. So now my open dot is over here, and I want to go this direction and pass through A. So that starting letter is important when it's a one-directional object like this. So be careful. Now, as far as the notation, though, or the symbol, we can just write it like this, and we'll still have the arrowhead pointing to the right. That's typically the way they always do it. They always have it pointing to the right, just for ease. So again, but that starting letter is the important part of it. So keep that in mind. Now the same thing is going to happen with rays because those are one directional as well. So if I had A here and B here, and I wanted to describe ray AB, what do you think? Which way is it pointing? To the left or to the right? Yeah, it's going to have to be pointing to the right because it's starting at A, and it's going to pass through B. And so as far as how we do the symbol for it, we could put a nice solid dot and then have it go to the right, but we don't really need the solid dot. We can just have it be like this. So, I mean, if you put the solid dot in there, you know, at the starting point, that's fine, but you don't need to. It's not absolutely required. It's implied, essentially. So ray AB, again, if we keep the letters in the same spots, now they want you to start at B and pass through A. So now we are going to the left. And we'd have something that looks like that. But the notation, the symbol, still that one headed arrow to the right. Now the last piece is a segment, and that one is dual oriented, so we can identify it either way, just like the line. And again, we don't need the arrowheads at all, and we don't need solid dots. So you could write it either way, and that would be acceptable. Now, the one mistake students typically make is they are slackers and they don't differentiate between the arrowheads and the no arrowheads. So be careful. I am a little finicky, as you probably already guessed. So if it's a line, it needs the arrowheads. And if it's a segment, it does not. So keep that in mind. All right. So that is a lot of just the terminology and stuff. We want to see one more piece, which is a small piece. We're not going to really dig deep into it. And that's when you have a two-dimensional, infinite directional object. What is that? Well, the fancy name for it is a plane. So a plane is an infinite set of points, again, very similar to the one-dimensional way up at the beginning, on a flat surface in two dimensions extending without boundaries. So for example, if we had an infinite chalkboard, I'm a big chalkboard fan. But imagine having one that went on forever in all directions. That would be pretty cool, but obviously hard to write on. So, but that's the idea. It's a flat surface. It's not twisted or anything like that. It's a completely flat surface, but it goes on forever in all directions. So that's a little bit hard to visualize, I know. So we're not really going to dig deep into that at all. So I wouldn't get too nervous about that. We're going to stick with the one-dimensional type of stuff and two-dimensional stuff that we can actually wrap a brain around. That's finite. So, all right. So let's stop there actually, and then we'll jump into the next part of this, which builds off of this terminology in the next section. So see you in a sec.